Okay. Okay, let's see how many are here. Okay, so I hope that you hear me. It would be nice if at least one of you can do a thumbs up if you hear me. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are going today to jump into the deep water and try to start discussing the technical stuff. In fact, I don't know if you mind, but I think it's a bit surrealistic to talk to my computer while seeing black areas for each of you. So it would be nice if you can turn on your videos, so I will feel that I'm talking to human beings, if you don't mind. I hope, of course, if it will slow down the performance, we'll do something about it. But I'll appreciate if you, those of you, do not mind to turn on your video as well. Thank you. Okay, good. So, okay. So here is the only slide that I'm going to connect from the prior presentation. So in this slide, I'm talking about the basic computational model in which we are going to describe everything, meaning in particular the algorithms. So what is this computational model? So the primary model will be what's called the serial doctrine, where the way we will instruct the computer to operate is that we'll tell it do one operation, then a second operation, then a third, and so on. And it's not that we are going to say it first, second, third. Sometimes we say the next operation and so on. But the point here is that our expectation from the computer is that no matter which operation we guide it to do, we expect it to be done in exactly the same time, unit time, quote unquote. So in this framework, the time will be by definition equal to the number of operations. And as we discussed in the last class, this is obviously an abstraction because clearly we do not expect all operations to take the same time. But this is a useful abstraction, and since the class you are taking belongs to the theory of the field, this has been the standard. And we are clearly going to make a point of what's right about it and what's not as we advance. I'm also going to talk a bit about the parallel version of it, where here we still assume that an operation takes unit time, but here we are going to assume that it is fine to do a bunch of operations at the same time, then do a lockstep and continue to the next group. This is another abstract model called PRAM for parallel random access machine. The first one is called the random access machine. And the main dimension that I'm going to emphasize when talking about analysis, the mathematical analysis in this class, is that what supports the description in both frameworks is the notion of mathematical induction. And one of the things that some students take it very easy, for others it's a form of a shock, is that how careful we are about proving things rigorously using mathematical induction. And I'm going to start demonstrating it in today's class. And this is really a place where mathematical background that you bring from your undergrad studies will be put to the test. And of course, you know, it's not that you have to know everything when you enter into a class, but you will have to be sensitive to it and figure out how to do it right. Okay, so that's the slide that we discussed, and now I'm jumping all over at the first technical slide, which is entitled asymptotic efficiency. By the way, do you see that for some reason, oh, you know what, I think I know. A second, I want to be sure that I'm being recorded, because it showed me that I'm recorded. Yeah, the recording is on, right. Okay, cool. Yeah, there was something in the setting. I apologize for that the other time. Okay, so I do again a share screen, and I'm going back to it. Okay. So, okay, for some reason it pulled me back to the bio slide. Okay. So asymptotic efficiency. So the point we will be trying to make is the following, and the framework in which we are going to discuss algorithms and complexity in general will be a framework with a few exceptions. I will mention the exceptions when we get there, where we are given a problem of a certain input size n, and when we are going to analyze the performance of an algorithm, we are going to do it as a function of n. And there will be, in this example, in this slide, we see three examples for algorithms. One, its runtime is upper bounded by C1 constant C1 times n, the second by another constant C2 times n squared, and then C3 times 2 to the n. And the point why we should prefer strongly this type of a bound, the linear bound, C1 times n over the others, is because one of the objectives of this course is to tell you what will be the asymptotic behavior of algorithms, and which means that we should prepare algorithms that will scale well with larger and larger n. And the observation here is the following in this particular example, that if you assume that all these three cases for n equals 1,000 run in 1 minute, the question is how fast you need to get a computer to run, how fast a computer should be to still run in 1 minute for a problem of size 10 times, tenfold of that, 10,000. And it's quite easy to see that here it got to be only 10 times faster, which is enormous. So we'll be very pleased if we can get a computer which is 10 times faster. But here it got to be, with n squared, 100 times faster. And here, when it's exponential, it's really unthinkable that you can still run it within acceptable time for such a problem size. So the point of this slide, as I mentioned in the last class, is that it's important to think about algorithms as a technology as much as we are educated and take it for granted that hardware is a technology. And this technology of algorithms is a big subject for this particular class. Mathematical notations. How are we going to express asymptotic behavior? So we are going to fall back on what we learned in a course on calculus, probably in your freshman year in college. And we are going to use these notations. So basically the notations that I'm going to discuss here try to capture three relationships in the asymptotic sense. So of course we know what equals mean when we talk about regular numbers. But asymptotically, equals mean that two functions grow the same. So we have a notion of equality, which is captured by notation, the notation theta, a notion of larger than, which is captured by big O, and a notion of at least or the other direction, which is captured by omega. So let me go over first over B and C, and then sum up with going over A, because A is the equal, which will actually be the intersection of B and C. And this is not surprising because larger than or equal or smaller than or equal, when both hold, you get equality. So we are first going to discuss the less than or equal, the big O. And the big O is described in words in the caption of this figure, where we say O notation, big O notation we call it, gives an upper bound for a function within a constant factor. We write f of n equals big O of g of n if there is a positive constant n sub 0. So this is the n sub 0, such that for and another constant c, such that to the right of n sub 0, c times g of n upper bounds f of n. Meaning you see that starting at this point and to the right, this curve is always larger than this curve at every point when we go up here for any value n. So that's the whole idea, and this is a very calculus type definition. In the other direction, which is called C here, the omega notation, we give a lower bound, which means here that f of n is omega of g of n if there is, again, a positive constant n sub 0 and a constant c. So n sub 0 is the point where we look only to its right. You have here the c. And what we are saying is that there are these two constants, constants n sub 0 and c. So when we go to the right, f of n, the curve of f of n is always above c times g of n. And so this is the omega notation, which is a lower bound notation. This was an upper bound. And when do we have a theta? When we have both a lower bound and an upper bound. And this is captured in the middle. So for A, we have an n sub 0 and two constants, C1 and C2, such that the function g of n, which is theta of f of n, I'm sorry, f of n is I apologize, is theta of g of n, if for two different constants, obviously C2 is larger than C1, f of n is captured in the middle between the two curves. So that's the basic idea. And the one notation that we will keep using probably many times in every class is the big O notation, this one, the upper bound. Okay, now I'm sorry, I need to break because my screen, and I haven't figured out how to get over it, has some let's see if I can get rid of this thing that upper bounds the others, the higher side of my yeah, I'm afraid that if it gives me an option of clicking an end here, and this will probably disconnect us, so it's not a good idea.
If the control
okay.
Zoom is blocking the screen, you can just move it. You can move the
Sorry?
You can move the control panel of Zoom if it blocks some of your screen. You can move it around without clicking on anything.
You mean, I'm not sure I understand.
The previous class, you complained that the control panel of Zoom that shows the controls of the call is blocking some of your screen in full
No, it's not a control panel. It's a panel of my options that tell me mute, stop video, and so on.
Yeah, you can move this around without clicking on anything. You can move it around the screen.
All right. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I can move it to the bottom here. But let's see what, okay. This is the problem. Okay, So let me try and do that because okay, so now I cannot put it completely aside. It has to occupy some space on my screen, but I agree it's a bit better now because it's at the bottom. But you know, let's see. I hope we'll manage. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So assume that your analysis upper bounds T of n, the number of the serial number of serial steps, some algorithm, by the following formula, which I dreamed up. I mean, don't look too much into the formula. 2n squared plus 100n plus 1000. So we can now say that T of n is order of n squared for a bunch of different reasons. So here are two reasons. One reason that fully meets the definition of T of n being order of n squared is to say that if I take my n sub 0 to be 2 and my constant to be 1000, then it's not difficult to see, you can verify that T of n will be upper bounded by 1000 times n squared. What I can also do by taking my n sub 0 to be 10,000, I can now take my c to be 2.1. And if you look at the definition, you will see that this is, again, will be a valid argument why T of n is upper bounded by 2.1 n squared. Is it clear to all of you why reason 1 and reason 2 are fully on par, they are equal, in order to establish that T of n, for what T of n is this, is order of n squared. Is this clear? Okay. And the question, so okay, so we saw here two ways to justify. Another claim which will be also correct is that we can argue that if this is T of n, then T of n is also order of n cubed. And the observation is that all of them are correct, are both valid, all three. So for this course, the question is what will be legitimate? So the point will be that for the theory side of the course, both the first two will be valid, but not three, in spite of it being correct. Why is that? Because order of n squared is a better upper bound asymptotically than order of n cubed. Okay, so we will cancel this out for the theory part. But now, if you ask yourself, from a practical point of view, you give me an algorithm, and here I'm telling you that I can upper bound its performance by 1000 times n squared, and here I'm telling you can upper bound it by 2.1 n squared. Which one is better? So the only place in which we will prefer this one, which is obviously a much tighter bound, to this one, is in the programming assignment. Because the programming assignment will actually ask you to look at constant factors. Because the myth that guides the theory part of the course, which is the lion's share of this course, is that we look only at asymptotic behavior. You may wonder why. The answer is that's the way that it's done everywhere. I really don't necessarily know to justify it. It has to do more with the established way in which this discipline has evolved. And this is the way that the textbook follows, and that's the standard. But in order to, because I think that one of the important things in a theory course, especially for computer engineering, in the course in the School of Engineering, is not only to teach you the theory, but also to teach you the limits of the theory. Because there is no theory in the world which does not have limits of applicability. And the only reason for giving you a programming assignment later on is to make sure that you are fully aware not only of the pros, of the strengths of the theory, but also of its limits. And here we will be fully aware of the constant factors. So for the programming assignment that you will get at the very end, it will be wrong to respond with 1,000 and n square, only the 2.1 will fly. Okay, so I hope I made this point clear. And let's proceed to the next slide. So this is a slightly more philosophical slide. I already defined this, explained this, the things on the top. So there is a term called the Pasteur quadrant. Pasteur was this famous French scientist, and what people give him credit for is for taking the realm of human possibilities into 2x2 grid. So what you are saying in science or in theory or in science can be either theoretically valid or not. And then it can be either usable or not. Okay, and a famous example for, so we are going now to view the 2x2 grid here. So if what you are saying is not useful and has no theory validation, it's no good for anything. Okay. If it is not usable but still theoretically valid, meaning it's correct, and our example is the order of n cube upper bound, or the 1,000 upper bound, then we say that it's theoretically valid, but it's not useful. And the classic example from physics is the work of Niels Bohr. Now, on the usability side, we see here the classic example of somebody who couldn't care less about theory, but and sometimes worked extremely hard to reinvent things that were known to the scientists of his time, was Thomas Edison, the fantastic American inventor, where what he did had no theoretical grounds, but was very usable, and we are all familiar with the many inventions he came up with. If something is both theoretically valid and usable, then it falls in the ideal quadrant that Pasteur came up with. And the example from what we described up to now is the 2.1 upper bound. Okay, so I hope that this, at least philosophically, puts things in perspective. Okay, one of the things that I'm going to do early on is I'm not going to go into details of quite a few things in the mathematical foundation part of the text. The only thing I'm going to do, and do it very, very briefly, is just to mention some pages and references and just send you to the textbook to read them, because you are supposed to know them. So when it comes to equivalence relationships, as you know, a relation is an equivalence relationship if it is symmetric, meaning an item satisfies the relation. So we have a binary relationship, and an item satisfies the relationship with respect to itself, and it is, that's reflexivity. Symmetric if A satisfies the relationship relative to B, then B satisfies the relationship relative to A. If this holds, then it is symmetric, and it's transitive if the relationship exists between A and B, and also between B and C, then it exists between A and C. These are things that you are referring you. That's everything I'm going to say about it to the text. Please look it up. Okay, we are going now to go very quickly over a classic example of an algorithm and discuss a bit, to give you the flavor of the presentation in this course. So it's a very famous algorithm called a quicksort. Well, the problem is to sort elements given in an array in a section that starts in index P and runs into index R. So suppose we have an array of size 1000, and suppose that somewhere during this algorithm we need to sort the elements between locations, say 15 and 25. So suppose this is 15, 25. Okay, so how are we going to do that? And the algorithm, because of its recursive nature, and recursion is a big topic, of course, in computer science and engineering, we are going to start with the full array, say 1 to 1000, and we are going to call quicksort recursively on smaller and smaller subarrays. So when we have a recursion, the idea of calling a smaller and smaller problem, the punchline here is that we hope that as we keep decreasing the size of the problem, at some point we hit some termination. Because if we have to do it infinitely often, then we have done nothing. We didn't give a real algorithm. So whenever you have a recursion, you must have an exit condition. And the exit condition here is if P equals R. Because we continue here, so we start the recursion by asking, is P smaller than R? And somehow when we go and analyze the quicksort, the recursive key quicksort, we are going to see that we are never going to reach a situation where P is larger than R, but it is definitely possible that we reach a condition where P equals R. And if P equals R, what is this telling me? So look at it. A, P, P, meaning suppose R equals P. So what am I doing? I'm asking, is P less than R? And what is the answer? No, right? So what am I doing? Going to the end, doing nothing. So that's a termination. Is that clear? So, but if P is less than R, then what am I going to do? I'm going to apply a black box, for now called partition. Partition will give me back an index which is somewhere larger than or equal P, or and less than or equal R. And so I'm not telling you yet how it's doing that. This will come in the next slide. And this Q index will be used to break the original array into P up to Q minus 1 and Q plus 1 to R. And what will be the basic idea there? The basic idea there is that we finalized the location of the element which we are going to exclude here as belonging in location Q, because location Q is not considered anymore. We are going to exclude it. So how will this proceed? So what I definitely owe you is this whole notion of partition. So let's see how I partition will be some process that will take the array, the subarray extending from P to R, will give you back an index, and what will it will also do? It will somehow shift the elements in this subarray so that remains to be done for sorting the subarray from P to R is to sort two subarrays from P to Q minus 1 and from Q plus 1 to R. So clearly, partition, what it will do, it will shift around the elements So all the elements smaller than Q in this original subarray will now lie here. All the elements which are larger than will lie here. Q will have its rank because relative to P and R, everything which is smaller than it will justify why the element in location Q is at the right place. And what I want you to understand is that this is almost a transitive reasoning, because what I'm going to assume, of course, is when upon calling A from P to R, I am already at the right range, meaning all the elements will be sortable in place. So if you give me an array, a subarray, A from P to R, you got it in prior rounds, and the prior rounds already took care that the elements that you are considering should be ranked in place between P and R. And here I'm refining it further by telling you, here is the element that should be in this mysterious location Q, which we're going somehow to figure out. Here I'm shifting all the elements which are smaller to this and all the elements which are larger to this subarray. Have I set up your expectations correctly? You see where this is going. Okay, so if I did follow verbatim something that, to be frank, I don't really like. It's a very low-level description of a piece of code which I find distasteful, but the reason that I'm going to do it is actually to make you appreciate that later on, we are not going to discuss things at this level of abstraction, but rather a higher level of abstraction. And the other reason for doing that, demonstrate to you how, when you have all the details spelled out, how to reason by way of induction about claims of correctness that are regarding the procedure that I'm going to discuss. And later on, we are going to still have a rigorous proof, but we are going to do much more hand waving. The amount of hand waving will be very limited. Okay, so what will be the process? So I'll tell you first on this example, and then we'll proceed. So the key term for quicksort, I'm sure that many of you are familiar, is the notion of a pivot. A pivot is the guy who will end up being in this location Q. So I'm giving you this subarray starting at P, going to R. I and J are variables that belong to the procedure written here. And one is the following. Arbitrarily, don't look for any wisdom here. We pick the element in location R. So these are this is location P, this is location R. In total, the subarray here has 2, 4 elements. Okay, so R is P plus 7 in this case. So 8 elements altogether. And arbitrarily, wisdom whatsoever, we pick the element 4, which falls under R, to be our pivot. So what will be the basic idea? The basic idea will be to figure out the ranking of R relative to all other elements, and then shift R to wherever its ranking is relative to the R. Put everybody which is smaller to the left, everybody which is larger to the right. Okay, that's the objective. So how are we going to do it? Very boringly, we are going to have these 2 indices, I and J. I will include, will be the point here, which will be P minus 1, and J will be P. So here is what we do with these 2 indices. And I can explain to you right away what is the role that these 2 indices will play. So if you look at some place in the middle of this execution, you see that here you still have elements you haven't touched yet. Here elements 8 and 7, which are larger than 4, elements 2, 1, 3, which are smaller than 4. So in this case, in this stage, we have 3 elements smaller. The location of the rightmost among them is marked by I. The location first haven't yet considered is marked by J. And clearly, the elements between I plus 1 and J minus 1 are elements which are larger than the pivot. Okay, so this is the invariant that I'm going to keep. So in the beginning, J points me to the first element I have not considered yet. I points me to the rightmost element, which I already considered, which is smaller than 4. But so far, I have not considered any elements, so I points me here to P minus 1. Okay, so here is what's going on. I take 2, compare it to 4. 2 is less than 4, right? So what happens to I? I shifts to the right. What happens to J? J also shifts to the right. Now, let's ask ourselves what to expect. In every round, what do you expect from J? We will always have yet another element that we consider, right? So J will be incremented by 1. So it's no wonder that if you look at the different steps here, in each step, J is 1 shift relative to the prior round. Okay? What happened with I? I will shift to the right in an element which is smaller than 4. But in this case, when I see 8, with 8, J moves to the right, but not I, because 8 is larger. Is that clear? So this is really what's written here. X, which is the pivot, I put AR into it. I is P minus 1. For J going to R minus 1, what's going on is that I do the comparison. Is the element under J, this next element I consider less than X. If it's less than X, I advance I by 1. I exchange I and AJ. So yeah, so here there was no real exchange, but if you look at the next time, look at here is where this operation actually takes place in full, in a meaningful way. Look at what happened here. Here, I ask, is 1, this value, less than 4? Answer is yes. So what do? I exchange 1 and 8. Okay, and I shift I by 1 to the right and J by 1 to here. So this is where the full steps are taking place. So after I'm done, what will be the situation? The situation will be captured here. I visited all the 7 elements. These are the smaller, these are the larger. Where should 4 go? The 4, I should exchange it with I plus 1, because I plus 1 is the smallest element, which is larger than the pivot, but it's the smallest, so it is the as left as you can. So by replacing this and this, I move to the right, and this is in its due location. So that's the whole algorithm. Okay. So here comes, so why am I bothering you with all this detail? It's really boring, I realize that, and I'm not trying, I really want to emphasize that this will be very unusual for this class to go into this level of boredom, if you will. So what's the point of this description? The point of this description is that I'm now going to demonstrate how to prove the correctness of the partitions by induction. So what will be the ultimate claim here? The ultimate claim is that 4 will be in its due location, everybody which is smaller than it will appear to the left, everybody that is larger will appear to the right. Is this clear correctness argument? Okay, so how am I going to prove it by induction? The answer is that I'm coming up with invariant. One invariant is the definition of I, and the other is the definition of J. So what was the definition of I? The definition of I is that it points to the rightmost element which has been established to be smaller than the pivot. What is the definition of J? It points to the first element which has not yet been. So J minus 1 will give me the rightmost element which is larger. So with this in mind, it should be clear to you that we have here a proof by induction. So what is the proof by induction? Induction has a base, right? The base is that in the beginning, I gave you the definition of I and J. Is it clear that for the base, the definition holds? I points to the rightmost element, which I consider which is smaller than 4. It holds trivially because it is meaningless. And for J, it tells me, it points to the first element I didn't consider. Again, holds trivially. So the base range. The question is, what is the inductive hypothesis? The inductive hypothesis is that the invariants I claimed about I and J hold true prior to a step. So in a step, I increase J by 1. So if it is true before, like it here, I points to the largest element, which is to the largest index, which is smaller than the pivot, points to the first elements I didn't consider. And everything in this space is larger. So if this holds for the inductive hypothesis, it will also hold for the inductive claim, because in the inductive claim, following one more step, what can happen? Either the new element I consider, like the 5 here, is larger than 4, and then only the J will move to the right, or it is smaller than 4, like here, and then I will exchange it with this 7, and the I will increase by 1. And, there will be an exchange of this 7 replacing the 3 and the J to the right. Okay, so do you see here why the type of very rigorous inductive proof that you went through in a course in your calculus course applies here basically verbatim? Okay, and again, let me articulate that this may be the last time we are going to go over an inductive proof at this level of detail. What we are going to do repeatedly is to go over this type of inductive proofs with the same level of rigor, but not necessarily detail. Okay, because as we go further, you will be required to fully comprehend and do it yourself, to prove things by induction, where even if you spell out everything, it should be clear that you have a picture of detail as here on your radar screen. And say something, it was because it was a level of detail, but you should reach this level of understanding. So this is exactly what is being done here, and I go and read it here, because what you see on this slide is exactly the proof by induction went through, and I wanted to do it without you spelled out what I really ask you to do is go over this slide and this figure, reconstruct what I just described. Okay, because that's exactly what is written, is how to apply the invariance, how to apply the inductive step in a very rigorous way. Is that clear? So I hope that this makes sense. Okay, performance of quicksort. So in terms of performance, quicksort is sort of a bit problematic because this number of steps that we are going to do, so the steps for partition are actually straightforward, and here is how we are going to reason about it. So the index J advances from P to R, and every iteration here, what is the total number of operations that we do? So the answer is that not all iterations will do the same number of operations, right? Because it depends if A of j is less than or x or less than or equal x or larger, right? So we are going to, because we are going about asymptotics, we are going to assume that we are upper bounding it by the worst case, meaning, so how many operations you can do at most? So suppose that you do this question 1, and then you do this operation and this. So suppose that you do the 3 operations here, even in all cases, just to be on the safe side. So the total number of operations will be some constant times the number of steps, meaning, I'm sorry, times r minus p plus 1. I apologize for that, because how many iterations do we have? We have r minus p plus 1, and in each of them we do c operations. So we can charge every iteration of the loop to one of the indices as are incremented from p to r. And this charging scheme is a big deal in this course, because one of the ways of analysis is to, the same way that an accountant does something, is to charge everything to one entity and to say the number of charges per entity is limited. It's at most some constant. And if we have, in this case, r minus p plus 1 entities, and each is being charged no more than 3, so how many steps can we do altogether? No more than 3 times the number of charge. So that's really a big deal in this class, and these charging schemes will come, we'll see it again and again. Okay, so now that we figured out the complexity or the performance of partition, the question is, what is the overall performance of quicksort? So let's observe, what is quicksort? So what will be the way that quicksort will begin? Let me remind you what's going on. For quicksort, you are given an array that first location is 1, last location is n. Okay, so an array of size n. What will be how are we going to start quicksort? By calling quicksort of A1 up to n, right? Is that clear? So this is how we activate quicksort. Once we call that, what will happen next? So what will happen next is that we will somehow, partition will tell us, here is your pivot, break around the pivot, now continue with partition arrays. What will happen in each of the 2 smaller arrays? There will be a new pivot for each, and this will break into 4 sub, so on. Is that clear? So, since this is what's going on, the real question will dominate the worst case performance of quicksort will be, how lucky to be with the partition. And because we have not done anything to affect the partition, and because we are going to focus the primary way of analysis in this class on worst case performance, and I'm going to justify it. We cannot assume that we are very lucky with the partition, and maybe we picked for our pivot either the smallest or the largest element. In that case, we have done very little, right? Because if we pick the largest element as our pivot, what will be the partition? You will get here and n minus, no partition really, because next time you will call quicksort on n minus 1 elements. And after that, you will call it on n minus 2 if you are as unlucky as you were in the first round. And since the number of operations in each application of partition or quicksort at every level of the recursion is linear, then what will be the total number of operations? It will be n, c times n, then c times n minus 1, then c times n minus 2, plus plus. So is it clear to everybody why this will amount to n squared? It's just an arithmetic series. Start with n minus 1, n minus, and so. Okay, what will be the dream partition? Dream partition is if we manage to hit with our pivot the element just in the middle. In this case, we get two subproblems of size n over 2. And if we keep being lucky and we keep hitting as our pivot the element in the middle in each subarray, it should be clear to you that the problem sizes goes down from n to n over 2 to n over 4 to n over 8. And after a logarithmic number of recursive calls, we have singleton elements and the problem is done. And since the depths will be logarithmic, at each level we'll invest linear time, the performance will be n log n. We are also going to revisit this type of recurrences again and again. This is more or less the hand-waving version of it. So balanced partition is the ideal. And what I wanted to point out is that we don't need to be so lucky to get n log n time, because even if we manage to repeatedly get 1/10 and 9/10, the depth is still guaranteed to be no more than logarithmic. And since every level will contribute at most linear work, it will still be n log n. Is that clear to you why? Because if you look at 9/10 to 1/10, keep decreasing, and even if the factor is 9/10, you will get in your base of the logarithm, you get log of, the base will be log of 10 over 9, and as you may know, log of 9, log of base 10 over 9 is no more than a constant times larger than log base 2, right? You know it from calculus and from whatever mathematical education you got before. Okay, so this will be as good in the asymptotic sense. Questions about that? But we emphasize that if you have any question, feel free to jump in at any point and ask. I mean, I really strongly encourage that. So please remember that. Whenever you have a question, don't hesitate. I may sometimes ask you, wait till the end of the sentence, or wait a minute. I promise that I will address each and any question you ever raise. Okay. Okay, next thing that you are supposed to do on your own is read Appendix A in the textbook. We are going to discuss recurrences And some of you have seen it before, for others it will be new. And as I mentioned to you before, I am going to refer systematically to both textbooks, the second and the third edition. The default will be the third edition, but I will also mention the second as we go, and also in the homework you will be getting. Okay, so we are now starting to play with recurrences. So the first recurrence that we are going to consider is something that we just considered, which is a recurrence that looks like that. The time to solve a problem of size of T of n is twice the time to solve the problem of 2 plus n. So is it clear to you that this is the type of recurrence we just considered here for the best case partitioning? Because when we start attacking a of size n from 1 to n, in order to break it into two, assuming that our pivot is just the guy in the middle, we invest linear work. So here it can be C times n, but let's say n for now. And then on each of the two problems that we get the elements smaller than the pivot and larger than the pivot, we need to solve each of them. And since we have two equal problems, it will be 2 times T of n. So what will be a solution for that? So we are going to make our life easy here and assume that n is a power of 2 for some, meaning it's 2 to the k for some integer k, or in other words, k is equal log base 2 of n. And the first technique we are going to discuss is the most intuitive one, which is expansion. What is expansion? Expansion says the following. We take the recurrence as given to us and we write it. No big deal so far. Then we ask ourselves, using this recursion, what will be the representation of T of n over 2? So to represent T of n over 2 here, we'll do n over 2 times 2, and we'll need to solve it recursively. We need to solve 2 of them, and what will come out is n over 2. And this 2 right here is the same 2 that goes through here. And this n remains here. So this is this n, this is this 2, and the T of n over 2 became 2 of Tn over 4 plus n over 2. So it's no more than substituting the recursion by what it says. Okay. So recursion is this funny concept of having a cat running after its own tail. But somehow we have this notion of a diminishing cat each time it does that until it reaches the, until we break out of this cycle. So the next thing that we do is now we replace the T of n over 4 by T of n over 8. Now the 2 by 2 here becomes 2 squared outside. This is the replacement for this. And look at what happened right here. We had an n here. We had a 2 times n over 2 here. So 2 times n over 2 contributes another n. And the observation is that as we keep opening the parentheses, at every level, we have an extra n. But this keeps coming down. the size of the problem under the T of n. When will it reach termination? After log n rounds. And what will be outside n? Because it used to be 2, and now k is log n, so 2 to the log n becomes n. Now, how many n's are we accumulating on the side? The answer is as many rounds as we have to go from here. And how many rounds did we have? Log n. And for this reason, we keep accumulating n's the quantity n log n times. So it's n log n. And that's really the solution, because this dominates this. And that's it. So this the expansion is just, we keep replacing, we see where things go, and we anticipate the termination condition. Okay, so this is the basic technique called expansion. Not always it's easy to do or even possible to do. And we are going now to consider other ways of treating recurrences.
I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
What is k exactly?
Oh, k is an integer. I'm just assuming that n is a power of 2. And meaning there is some integer k such that 2 to that integer equals n.
And why did we terminate after k steps?
Oh, because k equals log n. So look at that. Look at what's going on here. My termination is when when this quantity becomes 1, right?
Yeah.
When will it become 1? When n over k is 1. When will n over 2 to the k become 1? K will be equal n, right?
Yeah.
So when will this happen? When k will be, when once this quantity k is log n, right?
Yeah, and why do we terminate, especially when we reach t of 1?
Okay, because this is the okay. So
Yeah.
so first, okay, I think I see what you're saying. It's a good question, actually. It's actually a very good question, because what you captured with this question is that I didn't state right here the 2 terms of the recurrence. I only stated this. I should have also stated the t of 1 equals 1.
Okay.
Okay, so great question. Okay, so what I did not state here, so what you're saying, and it's 100% right, is that when I tell you solve t of n equals this, I must also tell you t of equals 1, say. And only then you have a fully well-defined problem to which this solution will apply. However, what I can say in my defense, okay, is that for the analysis of quicksort, actually explain why t of 1 equals 1, right? Because this is the case where p equals r, and then you just do one operation and you are out, right?
Yeah.
So while your comment makes full sense, for the statement on this slide is applied to the best case of quicksort, I already gave you the starting point where t of 1 equals 1.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Okay, so Now we are going to discuss or to prepare the grounds for the big hammer that we will learn in this chapter on recurrences, which will be a theorem called the master theorem. But the first thing I'm going to do, and this will probably be everything I will do today, is to give you a warm-up that will take me towards the proof of this theorem. And the idea will be to take this particular example that you see here, T of n equals 3 over of T of n over 4 plus C n squared. And to make it entirely clear, we are going to make the assumption that T of 1 equals 1. Okay, so it's not written here also, but make sure that you, by default, enter it everywhere, because that's a sort of a default that happens throughout. And now I allow you to assume that n is an integer, is a power of 4, where k is. Okay, so we're going to consider this not for every n, only n which is an integer power of 4, where or 4 to the k, where k is an integer. Okay, and we are now going to discuss a diagrammatic way of considering this recurrence by using a similar technique of iterative expansion. Okay, so is the problem clear? We try the solution for this recurrence by a technique of expansion, and we are going to use some diagram to help us. So here is the diagram. And the diagram basically is telling me the following. If you start with the basic recurrence, when you have a C n squared, you break it into 3 children because of this factor of 3 stated here, because of these 3. Each of them is of size n over 4. Okay, so that's what's going on in the recurrence without yet accounting for the n cube or anything. So when we look at the expansion that is going on, I'm not yet considering what I'm accumulating on the side here. If I do it twice, meaning I first say this level is identical to this, but now I take the n over 4 and I reopen it, what will I get? I will get a branch of n over 16, and again, 3 of them. So what you get here is a ternary tree, where every node has 3 children, and the 3 come from this 3 right here. Okay, so now we are going to consider what's going on as we expand the tree. And I hope it's clear to you that after this number of iterations, log n to the base 4, I'm going to reach the leaf level of the tree. Is that clear? Because think about it. At the top level, I have an n. I already told you that n is an integer power of 4, and I'm reducing n here by a factor of 4. So if you give me an n, and I keep reducing it by a factor of 4, how many rounds do I need to reach n equals 1? Answer? Log base 4.5 n, right? So if I keep going, reducing by a factor of 4, I will reach t equals 1 after this number of stages. Is that clear to everybody? Okay. There are two other questions. The first question I wanted to raise, okay, when I reach, how many leaves am I going to have? Because I hope you remember that the number of leaves increases a factor of 3 at each level. So how many leaves are we going to have? The answer is, I'm sorry, is that the number of leaves is going to be 3 to the power of log of n base 4. Is that clear? Why? Because when I go from here to here, I have 3. Then I have 3 squared, and so on. What is the last level? The last level is log of n over 4, right? Log of n base 4. And since I keep increasing by a blow-up of 3, how many leaves will I have here? I will have 3 to the height of the tree. Okay? And here is where the book throws us off completely, because what is the book telling us? This figure is taken from the book, that the number of leaves is n to the power of 3, to the power of the log of 3 base 4. So is the book wrong? Because I hope I convince you that this is the correct number. And the book claims that this is the correct number. Is the book wrong? Anybody wants to pitch in? So the claim is that the book is not wrong because these two funny terms are equal. And let me remind you, do you know to prove that these two terms are equal? That's a trivial thing. How do you prove that 3 to the power of log of n base 4 is equal to n to the power of log base 4 of 3? Anybody wants to pitch in? I mean, that's something you played with, I'm sure, at high school, places like that. Nobody remembers? Okay, so the answer is very simple. You take the log of both sides, and it's trivially the same, because what will happen when you take the log of this, base 4, you will get, this will come to the front, and here you get log 3 base 4. And when you do the same here, this will come to the 4, log of 3 base 4, and it will be multiplied by log n base 4. So when you take the log of both sides, you immediately see that these two terms are identical. Is that clear? Okay, so the book is not wrong. It only messed things up by telling us something without actually telling us that they are equal. Okay, so that's good. Now, so this will be the total number of leaves out there. And since each of them contributes 1, this will be their total contribution, n to the power of the log of 3 base 4. Now, let's ask ourselves, because when we do expansion, you remember, each time you get things that come out on the side because they're already contributed by this level. So the highest level contributes on the side n cubed. The next level will contribute on the side 3 times over 16 n cubed. Why? Because each of them will contribute n over 4 square, which is n over 16, and we'll have 3 of them. And then each following level will contribute 3 over 16 square, and so on. Okay? So the only thing I wanted to register in your mind, because my time is up, is that what we have here, geometrically decreasing sum. And when we have a geometrically decreasing sum, what is the total? N square, right? Because that's the first term. First term dominates a geometrically decreasing sum. So what you see here is the following, and this is the main lesson that we are going to build on in the next class, is that we have here the type of recurrence where the number of leaves, which is how much the last level contributed, was so much lower than the contribution of the first layer. And for that reason, the contribution of the first layer will dominate, and the whole recurrence will behave like n squared, which is the leftover from the highest level of the recursion. And we are going to see here really 3 cases. One, where every level of the recursion contributes the same. This is very similar to the n log n case that we discussed. And there will be the other extreme, where the leaves will contribute so much that they will dominate what all the other levels contributed. And the master theorem will teach us how to characterize different recurrences into one of these 3 groups, and it will leave some elements in the gray area where it will be beyond scope of the theorem. Anyway, my time is up, so just to remind you, our next class is Monday? No, Monday. Monday is Labor Day, okay? Next class is Wednesday. I think this is particularly important for students who are not in the US, because for an American-born guy, Labor Day is part of the reflexes, so they will not take. But if you are in Taiwan or wherever, Labor Day may not be on your conscious level, so please be sure not to show up Monday. Next class is Wednesday. Okay, so thank you, and from what I see, the class should have been recorded, so I hope that you will be able to see it there, and I'll see you a week from now. Thank you very much.